This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Paranormal Stakeout. I'm your host, Larry Lawson, and as usual, coming to you from the mothership of paranormal programming, the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Got a terrific show for you guys tonight. I'm sitting down here in the Southern Command Post of the X-Zone Broadcast Network, and really happy to have our guest on tonight. And it's actually going to be a continuation of a conversation we were having on his show. Our guest tonight's Kevin Randle. He hosts A Different Perspective, and we began our conversation at that show, and I'd like to welcome all of his listeners that are coming over to hear the conclusion of our conversation. Kevin is a preeminent ufologist. Spent more than 45 years studying the UFO phenomenon and all of its different incantations. He's also a military veteran, retired lieutenant colonel, Iowa National Guard, served our country in Iraq and prior to that in Vietnam. His latest book, Roswell in the 21st Century, is a big hit. I'd really encourage all of you to take a look at it. His website is www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. Kevin, how are you? Welcome back.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Larry Lawrence.
Oh, Larry Lawrence. See, he had to do that, ladies and gentlemen. This is a standing joke between us. And it's almost a shame you couldn't hear our pre-show conversation before we went on the air. But no, it's Larry Lawson, ladies and gentlemen.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Says so right on my screen.
Right on your screen. It should. Kevin, when we were on your show just a little while ago today, we were talking about how paranormal is a giant umbrella. You come from the UFO side of that paranormal umbrella, and here I am on the ghost side. And I had a very intriguing conversation about how those things meet, and I wanted to thank you for that. I actually learned quite a bit, and if you'll excuse me plugging your show, I got a different perspective on things.
Well, you can plug the show all you want.
Oh, I can't. Okay.
But I need to correct one thing. I'm not just housed in the UFO side of the paranormal umbrella.
Fair enough.
I've always had an interest in things such as extrasensory perception, hauntings, past life regressions, a whole spectrum of paranormal activity. So when you look at my library, you find books across the spectrum, and I've actually written books that deal with the paranormal.
And we're going to talk about that, and I do stand corrected. I guess we all just recognize you as the guy that wrote Roswell in the 21st Century, and your knowledge and background in Roswell. So that's kind of where we look at you. But you're right. You do cover many, many different areas, and I enjoyed the discussion we were having. When we ended our conversation last, we were talking about regression therapy, past lives, and that area. And that's isn't that kind of how you open the door into this side, my side, if you will, of the paranormal world?
I was thinking that, as we were discussing things in prior conversations, that it just seemed to me that there would be an overlap between UFOs and the paranormal, and wondering if some of the people who had done paranormal investigations might have also blundered into UFO investigations, because it worked the other way for me, blundering into some of the things in like past life regressions and that sort of thing.
Here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to invite my listeners out there, and I know there's a bunch of them out there. I want to say hello to Sylvia down there in Stuart, Florida, is one of my listeners. Get on my email. Let me know, folks out there in the ghost side of the house, if you've had some experiences with UFOs during your paranormal ghost investigation. So I'd really love to hear from some of you on it, and I'll share them with Kevin. So wanted to get out there, Kevin. I apologize.
That's fine. Your show.
That's true. Yeah, I'm interested in hearing, because the more I talk to you, the more I realized there really is a bleed over, and I do want to hear from some of my listeners out there that are involved in the paranormal investigation world. We've got just about a minute and a half before our first break, but your work in the paranormal and past life regression, briefly, you wrote a book on it?
I've written 2 books. I've written one called To Touch the Life, which dealt with near-death experiences, and during the investigation of that, stumbled onto some of the past life regressions in Edgar Cayce and that sort of thing. So it brought me into that. And then I did a book called Conversations, which was an outgrowth of an investigation into an alien abduction.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you, explore that area a little bit more with you too, and its connection to the paranormal world. Which book did you write first?
To Touch the Life was in 1995, and Conversations was done after 2000.
Okay, and both of them dealt specifically. You were actually looking at UFO abductions, right?
For Conversations, it was an investigation into a UFO abduction that kind of led into the past life regressions. To Touch the Light was specifically supposed to be about near-death experiences.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, we are about to go to our very first break. I can already tell this is going to be a fast hour. Folks, stay with us. Kevin Randle from a different perspective on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. We're going to continue this conversation about past life regression in just a moment. So we'll see you on the other side.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
Hello, I'm Pete Marsh. With my daughter Justina, we will be presenting the new radio show, Too Good to Be True. If something seems too good to be true, it usually is. But with the help of Justina's amazing gifts, we're going to gain insight into questions that don't yet have complete answers. Have you wondered who built Stonehenge and for what reason? Why are crop circles found in the same region as Stonehenge and elsewhere? Are crop circles a hoax, or are they created with technologies that we have little knowledge of? Who built the pyramids in Egypt and also in other countries? How and why were they built? Was the Titanic switched with the Britannic as part of a gigantic insurance fraud, or for more insidious reasons? What caused the Tunguska event when trees were flattened over an 800 square mile area in Siberia? Will the new insights be too good to be true? Well, that will depend on what you are prepared to believe. Please join us as we start on this journey together. For more information on Too Good to Be True, visit www.xzbn.net.
Little children aren't the only ones afraid of the dark. Millions of soldiers return from war zones with PTSD, anger, frustration, fear, and loneliness, much of which surfaces during the darkness of the night. You have the chance to change the lives of these American heroes. Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us provides free MP3 players for these men and women. With a list of 3 million songs in 16 different styles, 100,000 audiobooks, and 30,000 old-time radio programs, every veteran can find something to soothe and comfort them at no cost. All our players contain an 8-hour audio program designed to help veterans fall asleep. With 1,500 plus vets now participating, it's our goal to deliver 10,000 audio players this year. Go to our website at songsandstoriesforsoldiers.us. Help us help a veteran make it through the night.
Welcome back to Paranormal Stakeout, everyone. Larry Lawson, your host here, and my guest, Kevin Randle, the host of Different Perspective here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, as we continue our discussion into past life regression. Kev, you talked a little bit about your books just before the break. Why don't you give the audience tell us about the books, how you got there, and where you went with it.
The book To Touch a Light was supposed to be about near-death experiences. My agent had called and wanted to know if I could write a book on near-death experiences, and since they were going to pay me to do it, I said, of course I can. I didn't know much about it, but I spent a lot of time in the library in these pre-internet days when I could have done it all from home on the internet. But I went to the library. I was reading the medical journals. I was reading the scientific journals that dealt with this topic and some of the experiences, and I was looking around for people who might have had that sort of thing. Need to make it clear that by near-death experiences, I'm talking about the people who've actually died or say they have died, and they went into the light and they came back out and continued on, as opposed to just something that happens where you are in a car wreck and you call that a near-death experience, or you nearly hit by a car. I think it's been the expression has been co-opted in some fashion in that way. Yeah. But I was doing that, and as I was doing that, I was running into other things that dealt with these past life regressions and that sort of thing. Ran into Bridie Murphy. That was the Colorado woman in the 1950s who was undergoing hypnosis at a party, and somehow they took her back to a previous life, and she claimed to have been a woman named Bridie Murphy who had lived in Ireland and died before the turn of the 20th century, I guess it was, and the investigation about that. So it all came together that way for that particular book. So it's a book that explores all of that. The other book, Conversations, which I really kind of like because if nothing else, it's a really nice little story. But the woman had believed that she had been abducted by aliens. She was having these bad dreams and all of this sort of thing, and she didn't know exactly what was going on, and friends were telling her, well, they're not dreams, it's alien abduction experiences, and she contacted me about that. I didn't do a lot of abduction research, although I was one of the first that did some abduction research before Bud Hopkins and John Mack and David Jacobs came on the scene. But we were doing that. I found a friend of mine who would conduct the hypnosis, and we would see what we could learn that way. But we were very careful on that because we know how easy it is to lead someone under hypnosis, to get them to say what you want them to say and take you where they want you to go, or you want them to go. Right. So we were very careful on that, and we'd set up a protocol between the two of us that he would do all the talking because he was the operator, the hypnotist. If I had a question or something, I'd pass a note to him so that it wouldn't be communicated verbally between the two of us, and she could pick up where we were going with this sort of thing. And as we did this, we got to the point where he was trying to regress her into one of these events, and actually took her way beyond that. And she began talking about something else, and we were trying to follow it. And it turned out she was talking about a past life that she'd lived in London. And I always hesitate to say this because I don't want to give it away in the book, but actually what she was telling us is she worked with Jack the Ripper in his crimes. And we're just absolutely stunned by this. We don't know what to make of it. But she was telling us stuff. And so once we got that information, we would set up the next session with her sometime in the future. And I would go to the library and I'd be looking up the things that she was saying to see if it corresponded with what the people who had studied Jack the Ripper knew or what they had written about. And she was giving us some obscure stuff that I really had to dig to find. And I'm thinking that this isn't something you would casually come up. And why would you, in a past life, suggest you weren't Jack the Ripper, but you worked with the guy? You know, there was kind of a duality going on there.
Sure.
And mostly, if when they make fun of past life regressions, how come somebody was always famous in a past life? Well, as you know, that's not true. And so,
yeah.
So we were kind of following on like that and trying to learn as much about it as we could. So she took us through the murders, and then we started regressing her back, and it seemed that this spirit that she claimed was possessing her was one of the great killers in history. It's like it moved from one life to another, and the whole purpose was to kill as many people as horrendously as possible as it could, until she ended up and she's this nice little petite woman that you just couldn't think of a bad thing to say about her, and she's coming up with all these horrible descriptions of what she had done in these past lives, and just wonder what that's about. So Conversations is a look at her story and how it evolved, but it also touches on some of the other aspects of the past life regressions and some of the work of Edgar Cayce and things like that kind of ties the whole thing together.
You were talking about spirit guides and this particular spirit, if you will, this entity that's traveling through generations, killing people. Was it a demonic entity? Did you get that feel from it?
No, not at all. It just seemed like it was a regular spirit. It had inhabited these bodies, or was an outgrowth of these bodies that did these horrible things. I mean, she's talking about being Elizabeth Bathory, who allegedly killed 600 young girls so she could bathe in the blood, and buried them in the castle grounds. And so all these young girls were disappearing around her castle. And she was finally caught and walled up in one of the rooms in the castle, and they had a small opening where they would pass food to her and that sort of thing. She eventually died in the room, and then we migrate into the person working with Jack the Ripper, and finally we end up with the Black Dahlia killer. And I'm going, this is just absolutely horrendous. But we're looking at all of this stuff, and in this last incarnation, she seems to have been, and the last one being the one that we're of course dealing with, just a really sweet woman. She had a husband, she had children, she just was a very sweet woman, and these horrific dreams is what sparked this whole thing, and she wanted to get away from the dream. So as we're doing the regressions, of course, we're saying, well, you won't remember what we've talked about and all this, but we were taping the things and keeping transcripts of it with the idea we would supply all that information to her when we were done with it, so that she could do with it what she would. And so that was how the thing began, and it ended up when we were finished with it. She said that the dreams had gone away, and she was much happier. And
did she remember any of it? Did she remember any of it at all?
Not consciously until the end. I mean, we're giving the post-hypnotic suggestion, or I should say my partner is giving the post-hypnotic suggestion that you won't remember what we talked about, but when you wake up, you'll be feeling good, you'll be feeling happy, you'll be feeling refreshed, and that sort of thing as a way of dealing with it. Yeah, and when I was studying psychology, we would talk about people who had phobias, and how do you cure the phobia? If you're a fear of heights, how do you do it? Well, you take somebody up in one of those glass elevators up to the first floor, and you get out and you walk around and you look over the edge of the balcony of the hotel or whatever. And when they're comfortable with that, you take them up another floor. So you get them use in stages to deal with the height. And the only problem is then you have to worry about that fear or that phobia or that psychological problem manifesting itself in another arena.
Sure.
But I mean but that's how you do it. You sort of, I guess, flood them with the stimuli and get them used to it, so they're no longer afraid of it. So, yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Well, let me ask you a couple of questions. It's kind of the cop in me coming out here a little bit. Obviously, the first thing. When you got the stories and you felt that it might be an alien abduction, which was right up in your wheelhouse, if you will, what did she say that indicated to you that it might be an abduction issue? Anything in particular, or was it just the dreams?
Well, her friends, when she would
ruin your story, by the way. I don't want to ruin the book.
No, she would discuss it with her friends, and again, when I was doing my PhD dissertation, the thing I studied was belief structure effect on ambiguous stimuli. You know, if you see a bright light in the sky and you don't know what it is, if you believe in alien spacecraft, you identify it as a spaceship. If you believe in ghosts, you might identify it as a spirit, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So her friends were telling her, well, this is alien abduction. So she got in touch with me to talk about alien abduction rather than anything else. And as we were looking at this, she was talking about seeing the bright light, but in the abduction phenomena, people often talk about the light overhead and the little alien creatures around them and that sort of thing, and being taken out into the light, into the spaceship, if you will. So we're looking at this as an abduction, not thinking near-death experience or past lives.
But when you think about it, you got that light at the when somebody passes, they see the bright light, so I can see the correlation there. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, but that's the point exactly. You know, so we're thinking about, as I'd studied the abduction phenomena, you know, there was nothing that she was saying that led me out of that arena. Until we started doing the hypnotic regressions. And as we worked through that, then, we're trying to take her back in time to see when the first abduction experience might have been. And we actually ended up in a past life. And that's how we got to that arena. And suddenly we're looking at this and we're thinking, you know, this can't be right. And the first life she was talking about was Jack the Ripper. So I began the research into Jack the Ripper to see how closely what she was saying matched with what was being written about it, what had been said about it, and that sort of thing, looking at all the books in the library that I could find about that to see if what she was saying was close. Now, she of course now is in a male entity in this Jack the Ripper tale. She's no longer female. She's male, and her voice is sounding deeper and more masculine than it had been, and that sort of thing going on. So we're looking at all of that sort of thing, and I'm thinking this is just absolutely preposterous. I don't buy this at all. But as a researcher, I've got to take a look at this and see, you know, maybe I'm wrong on this one. I've got to take a look at it. I suppose it's the way with a cop. You know, you get blinders on that. This guy committed the crime, and you're kind of looking for confirming data, but something else is out there, and you've got to follow that other path.
It's called gut instinct. You know how that goes.
Well, in flight school, we called it tunnel vision.
Uh-huh. Yeah. In doing this type of work, did you research the mental health history? And I know this is a very delicate subject, but were you able to affirm there were no issues along those lines?
There didn't seem to be anything there. The problem was these dreams that were bothering her, and they would wake her up and scare her. So she'd walk around the house at night, late at night, trying to avoid going back to sleep or that sort of thing. So she was becoming very disturbed by that, but it was just the dreams that were manifesting themselves, and she didn't like the dreams. And I think we've all had that sort of thing. I know that when I got back from Vietnam, I had a lot of dreams that were not real pleasant. Mm-hmm. But as time went by, those became less and less.
Yeah, well, and certainly we use past life regression quite often in many different types of criminal cases. Sexual abuse, for example. I really can understand how sensitive that can be, and I guess that's where a lot of my questions from. Kev, we're about to take our next break. When we get back, I want to talk about your other book a little bit and get your insight on a few other things connecting the UFO world to the ghost world under the paranormal umbrella. So, folks, stay with us. Kevin Randle, this is fascinating stuff. Don't want you to leave. I want you to stick with us, and we'll see you in just a few minutes on the other side. Larry Lawson, Paranormal Stakeout.
Dreams are our personal gateways into infinite wisdom. Don't miss shamanic counselor and indigenously trained dream decoder Sandra Corcoran's inspiring book, Shamanic Awakening Between the Dark and the Daylight. This remarkable work chronicles Sandra's 35 years of experience with diverse wisdom keepers and her initiations throughout the Americas and across the British Isles, Turkey, Greece, and Egypt. Sandy's knowledge of symbology, psychology, and myth influenced her dream blog and workshops. Sandy offers private tarot readings, international journeys, a meditative CD, as well as her book, Shamanic Awakening, to encourage you as you navigate this earth walk, creating a deeper connection to yourself and all that is. Find this and more at Sandy's website, starwalkervisions.com.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
How would you like to be able to read other people's minds? Well, the next best thing is here. When you know how to read a person's name, you know how the person thinks, feels, and behaves. Each letter in our name holds a key to unlock our true essence. Our name contains both our gifts and challenges in this lifetime. Mnemology science discovers personality secrets hidden in the placement of the letters of our names, including the first and last impression people remember about us. Sharon shows us how to interpret the arrangement of letters as outlined in her book, Know the Name, Know the Person. Sharon Lynn Wyeth created mnemology science after 18 years of research and testing her theories, and has supported thousands of people around the world in understanding themselves and others better. You'll enjoy Sharon's unique teachings as she shares her system to learn the gifts behind your given birth name. Even if you don't like your birth name, there are jewels in this book. If you're thinking of changing your name, ready to name your child, or wanting to get along better with others, this is the book for you. If you'd like to improve your relationships and change your life for the better, get the book today, Know the Name, Know the Person, or visit www.knowthename.com. That's www.knowthename.com.
Hello, I'm Justina Marsh, and with my dad Pete, we are going to present a new show called Too Good to Be True. Together, we are aiming to discover more truths about this world and beyond. Do you have unanswered questions about the world? Do you ever wonder about aliens, conspiracy theories, or the universe? There are many shows discussing subjects such as pyramids or UFOs, but we want to relay this information based on our own research, including from spiritual means. Hopefully, listeners will be helped with their own beliefs and will appreciate the psychic insights that add to the previous research and information. We both look forward to sharing this insight and beginning this journey with our listeners. Visit xzbn.net for more information about when to listen.
Hey folks, we are back on Paranormal Stakeout with my guest tonight, Kevin Randle, as we continue our discussion. But first, I need to set the record straight a little bit here. I talked about past life regression in criminal investigations. That wasn't quite accurate. In therapy, they do regression therapy on patients to help them deal with trauma, and that's what I was referring to, not past life. So I want to make sure that's clear to everyone. But anyway, we got Kevin back here, Kevin Randle, www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com is his website. Author of Roswell in the 21st Century, and we are talking about past life regression. And Kevin, we just got done talking about your first book. Tell us about the next one that you wrote in this genre.
Well, actually, we've got them backwards. Conversations was the second one I wrote.
Oh, okay.
And the first one was To Touch the Light, and it was during that big brouhaha over the past going into the light. The idea that near-death experiences was the term I was groping for there, but okay. Near-death experiences. As I said, my agent had called me and wanted to know if I could do a book on that. And I said, sure, I can do that, because frankly, that's what I do, is write books. And so I was doing a lot of research into the near-death experiences, and I talked to a number of people who actually had those, and I always found it very interesting that they were very, very relaxed about their lives now, that after having this experience. And I don't know whether you want to chalk it off to some sort of brain function or dysfunction or whatever, but once they'd had this experience of this near-death experience, they seemed to be a lot calmer. They seemed to be a lot more grounded. They seemed to be a lot happier people, which I found kind of interesting. And as I was doing that research, I came into I'd found references to past life experience as well, and some of those were quite fascinating. I mean, there was one point, and I don't remember the names off the top of my head, but a fellow was talking about having, actually a younger fellow talking about his experiences in the Civil War. This is like 1960, and he's talking about his experiences in the Civil War, and gave a name and talked about the unit he had been assigned to and all of that stuff. And because the Civil War was fairly well documented, you could find a lot of those records, especially on the Union side. So they actually was able to locate the unit he'd been assigned to, and they'd actually located his name among the roster of the individuals, and found out information about when he'd been killed in battle and what battle he'd been killed in. And the fellow in 1960 was talking about it, and everything seemed to be accurate. It wasn't that he had researched this and then put together this great hoax. It was just everything sort of dovetailed nicely for that. So it was kind of interesting in that respect. And so I followed up on that a little bit as well. And then I also got into Edgar Cayce, who was the fellow that seemed to be able to diagnose disease from a long distance, a long way away, and kept, very, very detailed records of all of that. But some of the prophecies he made, I think that Atlantis would be found in the 1960s off Bimini in the Atlantic Ocean. Turned out that prophecy didn't come true. And I think he talked about finding a room under the Sphinx in Egypt. That was some sort of library that had been hidden beneath the Sphinx. And my understanding is they have located some void underneath the Sphinx that may be some kind of a room. So that prophecy might be right, but it hasn't come to fruition the way he was suggesting. So it got into all that paranormal things. And it's one of those deals you can look at that and say, this is just absolute poppycock. You just can't be real. And then you look at some of the details and you think, well, that's kind of interesting. Is it an amazing coincidence? Well, yeah, could well be amazing coincidence. But I was kind of brought about to the impression that there's really something more to it than just mere coincidence or people confabulating this sort of testimony for whatever reason. Most of the people that I talked to, well, the near-death experience, they were willing to talk about it. They just loved talking about it. They didn't care at all. They wanted to share it with everybody. But when we get into some of the past life regressions, they didn't really want to talk about it so much, especially when it seemed to be less than pleasant memories. And
Painful,
that sort of thing.
painful. Yeah.
Thank you. Painful memories.
Yeah.
They just didn't really want to talk about it that much. So, you look at all of that stuff and you have to say, well, gee whiz, this is kind of interesting, but is it grounded in reality? And how do we prove it's grounded in reality? Well, what you do is you take the stories that people told you and you check them out as best you can. But the thought that's always in the back of my head was, if I can find this information to verify it, then the person telling the story could have very well have found it. And in today's world, it's so much easier with the internet. I mean, you type in a name and you just, there's like 8 billion hits on this, and you go through what might be the best course to follow. So it's much easier to fake that kind of stuff if you're so inclined.
Well, and I agree with you. As a cop, of course, that's the first thing I'm going to look at is how you got this information. We get suspects and witnesses doing that all the time with us. But I kind of go back to the story, and you and I have discussed it before, about the young boy who at tender age of 3, 4, 5 was accurately describing World War II aircraft and was accurately describing being shot down. And in discussions was bringing up names that the parents were later, I'm sure you're familiar with the story, they were able to actually connect the names that the boy said with members of a squadron aboard a carrier in the Pacific during the Second World War. You got to ask yourself the question, if you're able to prove that, how did this 4 and 5-year-old kid come up with this information?
And I look at that sort of thing and I think, well, it's unlikely, but there's so much information kind of floating around in the air around you in these days. Mm-hmm. That you can pick that up sort of through osmosis, just sitting in the room and there's something playing in the background and you unconsciously kind of process the information. And the best example I can think of is there was a question on Jeopardy about, or Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, about what Hank Hill's profession was on King of the Hill. Mm-hmm. And I happened to know it had to do with propane. I've never watched the show, never watched the commercials, but I knew the answer. And it's because the commercials are playing in the background or something's playing in the background and something connects. Mm-hmm. And you could say that's kind of the same thing with extrasensory perception. It's not really what we think of it. It's just that you have sort of picked up information that helps you make a deduction. The gut instinct, something you've heard subliminally connects with what you're doing, and you're able to make a connection that you wouldn't normally be able to make.
So is it your opinion that that's where most of this comes from then?
No.
Okay.
I think that's unlikely. I'm just saying this is a possibility for that. As I said, when we talking to the woman about this, she knew an awful lot about it, and I'm also thinking the other thing is nobody'd ever done that before. When I say that, I mean she was talking about having been this Elizabeth Bathory. She had talked about being not Jack the Ripper, but his cohort. She talked about the Black Dahlia killing. And that's the other interesting thing. And the reason I got onto that sort of thing was in July of 1947. I'm doing research into the Roswell UFO crash. Mm-hmm. And so I'm pulling newspapers, and they're all on microfilm, and it might be 6 months on there. So as I'm scrolling through that, I see a headline about the Black Dahlia killing in January of 1947, and I move on, and it was a Los Angeles paper I was looking at, and I don't remember whether it was the Herald Express or what it was, but a headline caught my attention as I was slipping by about the third killing in the string that began with the Black Dahlia, and I stopped to read the article. So I just kind of picked up that subliminally. I went back to see what that was about. And so here's this kind woman telling me that she had been involved with the murder of Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, and some of these other things that went on at the same time in the Los Angeles area. The police aren't looking for a serial killer. There's nothing to connect Short with some of these other crimes other than the location. So they're not thinking in terms of serial killer who's out just murdering women because that's what he does. Mm-hmm. So you put all of that sort of thing together, and you're thinking, well, would this woman who thought she'd been abducted by aliens suddenly have strung all of this together? If we're looking just at Jack the Ripper or one of these other things, you say, well, yeah. she went and read up on this and was pulling a hoax on us. But I mean, it was everything that was she was saying in combination that kind of drew us into this thing.
Okay, so you're researching Roswell in 47. As you're researching it, you come across this information, the Black Dahlia killings, and in the sessions, she begins to talk about being involved in these types of killings. Coincidence?
Well, we've never said anything about this because there's no reason for us to think that she's involved with the Black Dahlia at all. It was just I happened to know about this because of the Roswell research, and that caught my attention. So I read some of the articles that related to that. But she strung these things together from one time to the next, and it was always these people who were involved in these horrific killings. And that was just kind of what caught my attention on some of that.
So that's what I'm saying. Do you think that was coincidence? Do you think you just happened to see it and she talks?
Well, that would be a coincidence because there's no way she would have known about that. And I'd found that stuff 4 or 5 years earlier, and it was just something that interested me. Because, I mean, the whole Black Dahlia thing was kind of interesting, and there's been movies about that and discussions, TV programs about it.
I guess what I'm getting at, though, Kevin, is don't you find it interesting? And when I say coincidental, and I've reached a point in my life where I'm not so sure coincidences happen. I think things are planned. If we're going to talk past life, spirits, different lives, that type of thing, is it possible you were guided? Just throwing it out there.
We in the writing community have what we call the library fairy. And the best example of this, I was doing a series of books about the Vietnam War of fiction, and I was going to do something with the Battle of Quai Son, and I was in I think it was a Tower Records store, and I'm walking down there, I have these videos there, and one of them said the Battle of Quai Son. The library fairy just directed me to that box, and I bought the video about Quai Son because I get to visually see that, and I can describe it better in the book by having seen the stuff on this video. But that's the kind of thing we talk about it being the library fairy, kind of providing the information when you need it for a specific project.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just thought to toss the coincidence thing out there because I just find that very fascinating that. She's goes into that during your sessions, or at least something very, very similar to that. I just find that very interesting. As we begin to roll back to our last break here, I just want to ask you a quick question. Do you see this? Where do you see this type of work, this type of regression work, taking us? Do you see that having an end game anywhere, as far as the paranormal community?
No, the problem with the hypnotic regression is the subject is always so suggestible. You can take them practically anywhere you go, and they pick up the cues very subtly, too. It can be very subtle cues that they pick up. And there's something known as pleasing the operator, where the subject wants to tell the hypnotist what he or she wants to hear. And it's subtly directed in that direction. And that was why we were very careful in passing notes. So we tried not to provide any verbal cues as what we were looking for.
Well, we're good. We're getting ready to take our very last break here, Kevin. So stick with us. And ladies and gentlemen, you stick with us also. Terrific conversation. We're not done yet. So stay with us. Kevin Randle, my guest on Paranormal Stakeout. We'll see you in just a couple minutes on the other side.
Are you curious? Do you want to learn more about how the world works and have fun at the same time? Study coincidences with me, Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD, on my Connecting with Coincidence radio show here on the XZBN network. Listen to Jungians theorize, statisticians randomize, true believers evangelize, while I categorize. I dance to the rhythm of coincidences. People who experience me see more of them. Maybe something on the show matches a thought in your mind. Let us know. Expand your mind to the weirdness happening around you. Synchronicity spoken here, there, and everywhere. For more information, put Connecting with Coincidence in your search engine and find my website, my social media sites, and my blog.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
True healing must address 4 levels: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, for us to live joyful and productive lives. We tend to treat 3 of the 4, leaving the spiritual languishing. If you're tired of the same dysfunctional patterns cropping up in your life, Soul Balancing is for you. Trixie Phelps, owner and founder of Soul Balancing, is a naturally gifted energy healer trained in numerous esoteric forms, including shamanism. Trixie has created a powerful modality that safely and effectively clears your energetic field. A Soul Balancing session can remove interference, heal trauma, and restore your hope. Contact Trixie for a life-changing long-distance session today, www.soulbalancing.world. There's a legend shared by many indigenous cultures of a time when the nations were cast to the 4 corners of the world. Each nation was given a body of sacred knowledge that held a different portion of the truth to preserve. True reality could not be known until all the nations reunited, combining the information. If a single one was missing, the world could not be reborn and darkness would prevail. The Science of Magic Radio is dedicated to reuniting the sacred knowledge. With the understanding, none of us has all the answers, but together we can open new perceptions and possibilities. Through our combined vision, the world can be reborn into a place where darkness no longer prevails. Join me, Gwilda Wiyaka, and the Science of Magic daily on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net, or visit us at thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome back to our last segment of Paranormal Stakeout here tonight. My guest, Kevin Randle. Want to encourage everybody to check out his website at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. Check out that latest book of his, Roswell in the 21st Century. I know you're going to find it fascinating. Also want you to take some time, folks. Go to www.xzbn.net. and look at all the absolutely fantastic programming on the X-Zone Broadcasting Network, including A Different Perspective, as well as Paranormal Stakeout. Check me out. Visit me on the website at www.paranormalstakeout.com. You can also find me at www.paranormalfbi.com. And ghostguy59@gmail.com is my email also, so I wanted to mention that. Kevin, we're in our last segment here, and this has been a fascinating conversation with a UFO guy talking about past lives. You brought up some interesting things. What's your total take on this? How do you feel about this whole subject?
Well, by the whole subject, you mean paranormal or UFOs?
No, I'm talking about the past life issues that you've been discussing with us. What is your final evaluation of it?
I'm ambivalent. I see things that suggest there's a reality to it. I see things that suggest it is some sort of mechanism in the brain that leads us to these conclusions. I just look at this stuff. I would like to believe, that the past lives and all of that is reality because it's certainly more comforting. But I just don't know where to go with it. It's very hard to quantify. It's very hard to prove any of this stuff. We can look at the documentation, the records from 100 years ago, 150 years ago. We go back much further than that. We don't have documentation. So it's hard to verify an awful lot of this information. And I kind of want to look at it from sort of the scientific point of view. We've got to verify this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And as I say, there may be alternative explanations that if we understood more about the human brain and more about what's going on around us, we might find those explanations, while less comforting, more rational. I don't know. I'm just really torn on this sort of thing. I look at the UFO. The Roswell case is the best example. I've just suddenly turned the corner here abruptly.
That's fine.
When I did the book Roswell in the 21st Century, I was looking at it as a cold case. Let's reevaluate all the information. I had been firmly convinced that Roswell was an alien spacecraft crash. It seemed to be that direction. But I went back through all the information that I had gathered and all the information that other researchers, Don Schmidt, Tom Carey, Stan Friedman, Don Berliner, Bill Moore, all of these other researchers gone through and brought all that stuff together and tried to make some sense out of it. And I discovered that an awful lot of the witnesses weren't telling the truth. Or they were embellishing the truth, or they massaging the truth. And when we get right down to it, we have a single document that might give us an answer, and that's the so-called Ramey memo. This is the piece of paper that Ramey is holding in his hand when he was photographed by a reporter from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And you can almost read that. There's been a lot of analysis of this thing and whether or not you can read it. But when we get down to the bottom of the case, the cold case, we have some testimony that is somewhat persuasive. We have a lot of testimony that blew up. We have a lot of witnesses who plugged themselves into the story who clearly were not there. And so I have now moved off the idea that it proves there's an alien visitation. There's some interesting things there, but the case is nowhere near as strong as I had once thought it was, and it's based on looking and evaluating the evidence that's available. And that's where we are with the past life regressions and the near-death experiences and a lot of the paranormal. There's some very interesting testimonies going on, but there's very little physical evidence that we can tie to these things.
And you hit it right on the head. You said you actually were changing gears. You weren't, in my opinion. Your point is well taken. We don't know. I can tell you all of my experiences in studying and researching a ghostly phenomenon, but the truth of the matter is none of us really know. Your opinion on UFOs, do they exist?
I would say that alien intelligences exist. The question is, can they get here from there, wherever they are? The distances are phenomenal between the star, among the stars. And when we move to outside our galaxy is like 110,000 light years across. So you start at one end, takes 100,000 light years to get to the other end of it. And the nearest galaxy to us is 2.2 million light years away, the Andromeda Galaxy. And we start looking at these vast distances. Clearly, I believe that there's alien visitation that comes from within our galaxy, and I would think it's coming from our neighborhood in the galaxy. But unless they found a way to defeat these distances, I am just very, very worried about that sort of thing, which is not to say there isn't a way to do it, because 150 years ago people couldn't fly, and now we jet around the world all the time. There was one point where science told us that if you traveled more than 60 miles an hour, you would die because the oxygen, the air would be sucked out of your lungs by the speeds. And we now know, of course, that isn't true. There's all kinds of things that were impossible 100 years ago. Well, or the internet. My God, I can sit in my room and now I do not have to even go to the library, and I have access to the entire knowledge of the human race.
Yeah. And that's the kicker. Technology changes to say that it won't change or it hasn't changed in some other dimension. I don't think we can say that. The kicker is, and this is my mantra, we don't know. So the question then, Kev, is how do we reach a point where we can actually find these answers? Because that's my goal, is finding these answers. Where do you, whether it's UFOs, whether it's ghosts, where do you see us in the paranormal research field going to try and find?
With UFOs, I think one of the big cases now is Levelland, where we've got witnesses at 13 different locations. The UFOs interacting with the environment, causing cars to stall and that sort of thing. There's some evidence that there was a landing trace as well. So we've got multiple chains of evidence for Levelland. It's not just witness testimony. It's a lot of other stuff going on there. And that's kind of what we need for all of this, is a case with the multiple chains of evidence, where you've got not only the observational testimonies of the people involved, but there's some kind of physical evidence lay behind. And I think in UFOs, we've got a much better chance of that.
Absolutely.
Because we're talking about a physical reality coming down and landing, as opposed to something that is ephemeral, like the ghost sightings. The ghosts don't leave traces behind. You might get pictures, but pictures really aren't that good.
They can be. Just like witness testimony. We know this from criminal court. Witness testimony can be destroyed. You said something interesting that caught my ear, and help me understand this. You're saying there may be alien visitation, but they're in our neighborhood.
And it's only because I'm looking at the vast distances. So I assume, and it may be it's easier to travel, 1,000 light years than it is 12. I don't know these things, because if I understood the mechanism of interstellar flight, I'd be really, really rich, and I would be I'd be motoring around the galaxy.
You would,
but we don't know anything about it. So I presume that the visitation would be coming from our neighborhood of the galaxy within 50 or 60 light years. Okay. But it may be within 500 light years or 1,000 light years or 10,000 light years. The distances are just so vast that it's almost incomprehensible. And that's kind of my stumbling block. I'm looking for some way to reduce the distances, the travel time.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this question in our last few minutes together, because you hit me with this on your show. How do you see, when you've done UFO investigations, have you ever had a paranormal ghost experience conducting that? And do you think there's a connection between the two in any way, shape, or form?
The only connection I've seen was the lady who believed she was abducted, and we ended it up in past life research, which is not really quite the same thing.
No, it's not.
When I've done the UFO investigations, we have not gone in the direction of another avenue of the paranormal. But I will say this quickly. We don't explore that, but it may come down to the belief structure of the witness we're talking to, who is seeing this ambiguous stimuli, this light in the sky, interpreting it as a spacecraft when it might have been something else.
Yeah.
And it's that interpretation by the witness that drags us into the UFO field.
And I think that happens regardless of whether it's our two fields or it could be cryptozoology. It certainly is the mindset, the belief system of the witness. So I would completely agree with you there. And their perception of life and what they see. So I completely agree with you there. But you're not really seeing, because we talked on your show quite a bit about folks on my side of the fence connecting UFOs to ghosts and maybe energy fields. And some people so far are saying ghosts and UFOs are the same, and the interdimensional issue. Are there different dimensions? You're not seeing a correlation.
I don't see it, but could be that we are so narrowly focused on the extraterrestrial that we miss that sort of thing. And it may be that we're not talking about extraterrestrials when we're talking about UFO sightings. We're actually talking about some sort of interdimensional cataclysm that drags them into our dimension. And
in our last 15, 20 seconds here, I'm just gonna make this comment. This is where I think that all of us need to come together and maybe broaden our horizons, as you've done for me, Kevin Randle. Broaden our horizons so we have a clearer understanding of the different fields, and maybe keep our eyes open, because maybe some of these answers sit right under our nose, but we're too focused on one thing, too tunnel visioned, if you will. Just a thought.
And I think you're right. We sometimes have to ask the additional questions, and sometimes we just don't.
Well, it's been a real pleasure having you with us tonight. I enjoyed being on your show. Loved you being on this show. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us tonight. This is Larry Lawson, Paranormal Stakeout, with my guest and my good friend Kevin Randle. Kevin, thanks for being here. And everybody, we will see you next week. See you on the other side.